what's up mga kokotes? Megan Kuya Jen. Welcome sa Kuwaderknows, where learning is the name of our game. Pero kung bago pa lang sa aming YouTube channel, pinutin mo na ang subscribe, like, and share buttons para maging updated ka sa aming video. For today's video, we will be continuing one of Rizal's works. Ayan. So, ang ating aaralin naman ay tungkol sa isang sanaysay na may pamagat na Sobre La Indolencia, Sobre La Indolencia de los Filipinos. Ayan. I'm so sorry if I had some uttering kanina. Ayan. So, ang English translation ay On the Indolence of the Filipinos. It is an essay on the so-called Filipino indolence and an evaluation of the reasons for such allegations. So, meron tayo dito na-identify na mga important quotations or sayings na maaari natin gamitin as a notable quotes na ma-apply natin sa realidad. Una na dito ay, in the Philippines, one's own and another's faults, the shortcomings of one, the misdeeds of another are attributed to indolence. Also, meron tayo ditong, we must confess that indolence does actually and positively exist there. Only that, instead of holding it to be the cause of the backwardness and the trouble, we regard it as the effect of the trouble and the backwardness by fostering the development of a lamentable predisposition. On this lecture video, let us read lang muna kung ano yung mga notable quotes o yung pwede nating magamit as we discuss on another lecture video kung ano nga ba yung kaligirang pangkasaysayan or yung analysis na pwede nating i-include dito sa Sobre La Indolencia de los Filipinos. A hot climate requires of the individual quiet and rest, just as cold incites to labor and action. For this reason, the Spaniard is more indolent than the Frenchman more so than the German. Perhaps the reply to this will be that white men are not made to stand the severity of the climate. A mistake. A man can live in any climate, if he will only adapt himself to its requirements and conditions. Also, meron tayo ditong an hour's work under that burning sun, in the midst of pernicious influences springing from nature in activity, is equal to a day's work in a temperate climate. It is, then, just that the earth yield 100-fold. Also, ito rin, pwede rin natin siyang magamit as a quotation on a philosophical one. Who is the indolent one in the Manila offices? Is it the poor clerk who comes in at 8 in the morning and leaves at 1 in the afternoon with only his parasol? Who copies and writes and works for himself and for his chief? Or is it the chief who comes in a carriage at 10 o'clock, leaves before 12, reads his newspaper while smoking and with his feet cocked up on a chair or a table, or gossiping about all his friends? Which is indolent? The native coadjutor, poorly paid and badly treated, who has to visit all the indigent sick living in the country, or the friar curate who gets fabulously rich, goes about in a carriage, eats and drinks well, and does not put himself to any trouble without collecting excessive fees? Diba? Next, man is not a brute. He is not a machine. His object is not merely to produce. That's why people should not be treated as slaves, because we are not machines, and even the president is not a machine. Kaya we should know how to take rest and manage our loads of works. Man's object is not to satisfy tile passions of another man. His object is to seek happiness for himself and his kind by traveling along the road of progress and perfection. Ito pa, the evil is that the indolence in the Philippines is a magnified indolence, an indolence of the snowball type. If we may be permitted the expression, an evil that increases in direct proportion to the square of the periods of time, an effect of misgovernment and of backwardness, as we said, and not a cause thereof. Next, indolence in the Philippines is a chronic malady, but not a hereditary one. The Filipinos have not always been what they are. Witnesses whereto are all the historians of the first years after the discovery of the islands. The first things noticed by Pigafetta, who came with Magellan in 1521 on arriving at the first island of the Philippines, Samar, was the courtesy and kindness of the inhabitants and their commerce. A very extraordinary thing, and one that shows the facility with which the natives learned Spanish. In that 50 years before this arrival of the Spaniards in Luzon, in that very year, 1521, when they first came to the islands, there were already natives of Luzon who understood Castilian. Castilian is one of the dialect of Spanish. Accordingly, the Filipinos, in spite of the climate, in spite of their few needs, they were less than now, were not that the indolent creatures of our time, and as we shall see later on, their ethics and their mode of life were not what is now complacently attributed to them. We have already spoken of the more or less latent predisposition which exists in the Philippines towards indolence, and which must exist everywhere in the world, in the whole world, in all men, because we all hate work more or less, as it may be more or less hard, more or less unproductive. The dolce far niente of the Italian, the ras ars la barriga of the Spaniard, the supreme aspiration of the Burgess to live on his income in peace and tranquility, attest this. Man works for an object. Remove the object and you reduce him to inaction. The most active man in the world will fold his arms from the instant he understands that it is madness to bestir himself. That this work will be the cause of his trouble. That for him it will be the cause of vexations at home and of the pirates' greed abroad. It seems that these thoughts have never entered the minds of those who cry out against the indolence of the Filipinos. And for our last slide, pero hindi pa ito yung last the abandonment of the fields by their cultivators, whom the wars and practical attacks dragged from their homes, was sufficient to reduce to nothing the hard labor of so many generations. In the Philippines, abandoned for a year, the land most beautifully tended, and you will see how you will have to begin all over again. The rain will wipe out the furrows, the floods will drown the seeds, plants and bushes will grow up everywhere. And on seeing so much useless labor, the hand will drop the hoe. The laborer will desert his plow. And still struggled a long time against indolence, yes. But their enemies were so numerous that at last they gave up. And tomorrow we will continue reading some important, oh my gosh, some important notable quotations na pwede nating makuha dito sa Sobre La Indolencia de los Filipinos.